In less than a year, the CIA watched over 100 of its most sensitive operations collapse, while at least 10 loyal agents vanished forever, executed because of a single insider. The world knew the Cold War for its frontline spies and shadowy battles, but no one expected the agency's greatest threat to be sitting at his own desk. The most damaging mole in CIA history did not act out of ideology, but out of desperation. How did an ordinary career official unleash a betrayal so devastating that his actions still haunt American intelligence? Aldrich Ames began his journey at the CIA in 1957, not as a spy or analyst, but as a teenage records clerk. His father, himself a veteran of American intelligence, helped open the door. Ames spent his summers marking classified documents and running errands inside Langley's walls, absorbing the rhythms of a world built on secrets. By the time he finished college at George Washington University, he had already logged years in the agency's back rooms. The official path from clerk to case officer was never glamorous. Ames joined the CIA's career trainee program in 1967, despite a string of alcohol-related arrests and disappointing psychological evaluations. He was sent overseas to Ankara, Turkey, where he tried, sometimes awkwardly, to recruit Soviet officers and gather intelligence on radical student groups. His early reviews were mixed. Supervisors noted his skill with paperwork, but questioned his reliability in the field. Drinking bouts and missed deadlines became familiar patterns. Still, the agency kept promoting him. By the late 1970s, Ames was handling some of the CIA's most sensitive Soviet assets in New York. He had access to operational files, agent identities, and the inner workings of both the CIA and the FBI's Soviet counterintelligence programs. Yet the red flags kept piling up. His heavy drinking was an open secret. He procrastinated, cut corners, and sometimes failed to follow basic security protocols. Colleagues noticed, but in a culture that prized loyalty and discretion, warnings were easy to overlook. Ames's personal life grew more complicated with each passing year. He married a fellow officer, Nancy Segabath, but their relationship struggled under the strain of agency rules and his own instability. In 1981, a posting to Mexico City changed everything. There, Ames began an affair with Maria del Rosario Casas Dupuy, a Colombian embassy official and CIA informant. His marriage collapsed. The divorce, combined with Rosario's taste for luxury, left Ames drowning in debt. He owed thousands on credit cards, fell behind on taxes, and struggled to keep up with Rosario's spending. Meanwhile, he continued to rise through the ranks, gaining even broader access to the agency's most protected secrets. By 1985, Ames had married Rosario and returned to Washington. His financial problems had only deepened. He was now a senior officer in the Soviet East European Division, responsible for protecting the very assets he would soon betray. The warning signs, chronic debt, alcohol abuse, professional misconduct, and a relationship with a foreign national were all present. Each one, on its own, should have triggered concern. Together, they formed a portrait of vulnerability hiding in plain sight. Yet, surrounded by colleagues who trusted his experience and family pedigree, Ames moved through the halls of the CIA with little scrutiny. The agency's greatest threat was not a shadowy outsider, but a man who had spent nearly 3 decades inside its walls, quietly collecting the keys to its most guarded secrets. On April 16, 1985, Aldrich Ames stepped through the doors of the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., carrying the weight of his mounting debts and a decision that would shatter the foundations of American intelligence. He introduced himself to a KGB officer and offered information in exchange for cash. The Soviets did not hesitate. Ames walked out with $50,000 in crisp bills, his first payment for treason. He later claimed it was a one-time fix for his financial problems, a desperate gamble to buy some breathing room. But the moment money changed hands, there was no going back. In the weeks that followed, Ames began preparing something far more devastating. By June of 1985, he had set his sights on a much larger payoff. Inside his office on the 4th floor at CIA headquarters, he gathered a mountain of classified documents, operational cables, agent lists, and files that revealed the identities of more than 10 top-level CIA and FBI sources inside the Soviet Union. He wrapped between 5 and 7 pounds of secret papers in plastic bags, enough to fill a briefcase. There were no bag checks, no alarms, no questions as he carried the bundle out of Langley. Years of trust and lax security made it almost routine. Ames drove into Washington, heading for a lunch meeting at Chadwick's, a Georgetown restaurant popular with diplomats. His contact, Sergei Chuvakin, was a Soviet embassy official whom Ames was officially tasked to recruit. In reality, Chuvakin was his KGB handler. Over lunch, Ames handed over the plastic-wrapped documents. In exchange, he received another envelope stuffed with cash. The CIA would later call this handoff the largest amount of sensitive documents and critical information ever known to have been passed to the KGB in one meeting. The packet contained the keys to the CIA's most protected operations, names, reporting, and plans that had taken years to build. Within those files were the lifelines of men and women risking everything for the United States. Ames had delivered them all in a single afternoon, with the casualness of a business transaction. The damage was immediate and irreversible. The betrayal was no longer a personal crisis or a matter of desperation. It was a catastrophe that would ripple through the entire intelligence community, setting off a chain reaction that neither Ames nor the agency could control. The fallout from Aldrich Ames's betrayal swept through the CIA networks with a force few could have imagined. In the months after June 1985, Soviet security services moved quickly and quietly. One by one, CIA assets across the Soviet Union vanished. Some were summoned to Moscow for routine meetings and never returned. Others simply stopped reporting, their lifelines to the West cut without warning. For the agency, the silence was deafening. Among those lost was General Dmitry Polyakov, a pillar of Western intelligence for more than 2 decades. Polyakov, a senior officer in the Soviet GRU, risked everything to pass military secrets to the United States. His insights shaped American policy at the highest levels, offering a rare window into Soviet strategy and technology. Polyakov's motivations were complex. Some say patriotism, others a deep disillusionment with the Soviet regime, but his value was never in doubt. After Ames's disclosure of his name, Polyakov's fate was sealed. He was arrested around 1986, tried in secret, and executed by firing squad in 1988. For years, even his family was left in the dark, told nothing of his final days or the charges against him. Polyakov was not alone. Gennady Varanik, a KGB officer who had secretly aided the CIA, was arrested in 1985 and executed soon after. Valery Martinov and Sergei Motorin, both KGB officers working as CIA sources, were recalled to Moscow that same year. They too faced closed trials and execution. These men had lived double lives, passing information at enormous personal risk, only to be betrayed by someone they would never meet. The scale of the damage was unprecedented. US officials estimate that at least 10 agents lost their lives as a direct result of Ames's disclosures. Dozens more were imprisoned, disappeared into labor camps, or sidelined forever. More than 100 intelligence operations collapsed, some before they had even begun. The losses were not just numbers on a page. They were fathers, husbands, colleagues, people who had trusted that their sacrifices would matter. In the halls of Langley, the sense of grief was matched only by confusion. How could so many trusted sources fall so quickly? The answer would take years to uncover, but the cost, in lives and in trust, was immediate and irreversible. Aldrich Ames's transformation from a man drowning in debt to one living with all the trappings of wealth did not go unnoticed inside the CIA. Within a year of his first meeting with the KGB, he and Rosario moved into a spacious house in an upscale Arlington neighborhood. The price tag hovered around $540,000, an astonishing figure for a mid-level government employee already known for financial troubles. The couple paid for much of it in cash and immediately set about expensive renovations, erasing years of unpaid bills and credit card balances almost overnight. Bank records later revealed a pattern that was hard to miss. Large cash deposits, often in the tens of thousands of dollars, would appear in their accounts within days of Ames's meetings with Soviet handlers. Credit card debts, once a constant source of stress, vanished. Tax liens were settled. The couple's financial anxieties seemed to dissolve, replaced by a new routine of luxury. The most visible symbol of this new life rolled up to CYA headquarters one morning, a gleaming Jaguar sedan. Ames, whose colleagues remembered him as rumpled and perpetually short on cash, now drove one of the most expensive cars on the lot. Rosario was seen in designer clothes and jewelry, shopping at boutiques well beyond the reach of most agency families. Their spending became a quiet topic of conversation in the Langley hallways. Some guessed at a family inheritance or assumed Rosario had wealthy relatives in Colombia. Others shrugged it off as eccentricity. But the scale of the spending was impossible to ignore. Between 1985 and 1994, the Soviets paid Ames more than $2 million, making him one of the best compensated spies in American history. By 1989 alone, he had received nearly $1.9 million. The money trail was clear in hindsight, but at the time the agency's internal controls failed to connect the dots. Each unexplained deposit, each lavish purchase, was a clue hiding in plain sight, a signal that something was deeply wrong. Yet for years the signs went unheeded. The evidence, quietly accumulating in bank ledgers and real estate records, would eventually become the foundation of the case against him. For now, it was just another mystery, whispered about in offices and break rooms, as Ames and Rosario continued to spend far beyond their means. The hunt for the source of the CIA's catastrophic losses in the Soviet Union took a costly detour in 1986. Acting on a tip from a Soviet case officer, a tip planted by the KGB itself, CIA counterintelligence launched an intensive probe at the Warrenton Training Center, a classified communications site in Virginia. The story was plausible enough to pull focus. They were told the mole worked at Warrenton. Over the next year, investigators scrutinized 90 employees, combed through personnel files, and built a list of 10 possible suspects. None stood out. The search consumed time, resources, and attention, all while the real traitor operated undisturbed. Ames, meanwhile, was posted in Rome, far from the scrutiny that might have exposed him. The KGB's misdirection bought Ames years of freedom. While the CIA's best analysts chased phantoms at Warrenton, Ames continued to funnel secrets to Moscow, each transaction paid in cash and each loss chalked up to technical compromise or bad luck. Internal red flags, his sudden wealth, his open meetings with Soviet officials, his erratic performance, were dismissed or explained away. The CIA's culture of trust and compartmentalization shielded him from suspicion even as the damage mounted. By mid-1991, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Losses had continued unabated, and the technical explanations no longer held up. A joint CIA and FBI team was formed, bringing together analysts and investigators from both agencies. Among them were Sandy Grimes and Jean Verteuil, who began to re-examine the evidence with fresh eyes. In August 1992, a breakthrough. They discovered a direct correlation between Ames's meetings with Soviet diplomat Sergei Chuvakhin and large cash deposits in Ames's bank accounts. The financial trail, long overlooked, now pointed squarely at a single suspect. The years lost to misdirection had allowed Ames to operate with impunity, but the evidence was now undeniable. The investigation had finally narrowed, and the focus was about to shift from analysis to action. In March 1993, the FBI launched a full-scale investigation targeting Aldrich Ames. For 10 months, a surveillance team tracked nearly every move he made. Agents installed electronic bugs in his Jaguar, monitored his phone calls, and sifted through his household trash for clues. Every bank deposit, every phone conversation, every errand was logged and analyzed. The team pieced together a pattern. Large cash deposits followed meetings with Soviet diplomats, and shredded financial statements pulled from his garbage matched the timeline of KGB payoffs. Surveillance teams watched Ames and his wife Rosario as they moved through their daily routines, careful to document any sign of clandestine contact. By early 1994, the investigation reached a tipping point. Ames scheduled a trip to Moscow, raising fears that he might defect or receive new instructions from his handlers. The risk was too high to wait any longer. On the morning of February 21, 1994, FBI agents moved in. As Ames and Rosario pulled out of their driveway in Arlington, agents surrounded their car. Ames protested, "You're making a big mistake. You must have the wrong man." Both were taken into custody. With the evidence in hand, prosecutors pressed for a confession. On April 28, 1994, Ames pleaded guilty in federal court. He admitted to compromising virtually all Soviet agents of the CIA and other American and foreign services known to me, and to delivering a huge quantity of information on United States foreign, defense, and security policies. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His confession closed the book on one of the most destructive betrayals in American intelligence history. The investigation's relentless detail, wiretaps, trash pulls, and surveillance logs had finally ended the 9-year run of the CYA's most damaging mole. Even now, US intelligence agencies spend billions each year battling insider threats, because betrayal rarely looks like fiction. The warning signs the CIA missed remain the vulnerabilities hackers and foreign agents exploit today. In a world where trust is currency, one person's greed can still tip the balance. The next breach may already be unfolding, unseen. What safeguards would you trust with your own secrets?